Okay, welcome back. Last video we left off and we talked about the raw data, the two support tabs we have here in version 1.0. Next we're going to go through these four. Now these four tabs, temps, LSL awards, employee hours, and LOA recon. So those are all specific reports that we can pull right out of this raw data to give you a quick visual. So it's something that you can either track, monitor, print out as a report, adjust a little bit. I'll try to show you what's behind the pivot tables and how we kind of created them. So let's move into the temps. So in terms of temps, let me scroll in here so that it's more visual. We have temp codes A, B, and C. Now this can be, it's as accurate as the data in the R60, so please remember that. One thing that we do here, and you can see it's frozen on 9, so you can scroll up and down in the header stay. Across here we have report date, which is the end of the pay period. So the count all the way down, so you could expand that if you wanted to, but it's simply counting how many employees that you have in a temp status, or temp coded A, B, and C. In my data I had all three, just one in C. You can see down here. And you have a filter A, B, and C, and nothing. Nothing would bring in all of your employees. And this is the temp report, so that's what we're doing here. This pivot table, you can right click and show field list if you want to. So we put the report date across the top, so we're going to see our fiscal year expand as we go. Sum of pay hours, temp code, and real name. So if you wanted to see the person's name together, because maybe they went from, like this guy here, temp A to temp B, so we have hours as both. Alright, and if you wanted to see it like that, no problem, just go ahead and do that, make that adjustment. It's going to come out like this initially, and then sum of hours. You don't see any data here, you just see kind of a Gantt chart looking thing. So scroll back out. Let's see what I did. I'm going to hit Alt OD, and what Alt OD is going to take me into is the conditional formatting. So Alt OD, and it brings up Formatting Rules Manager. So in this rule with a pivot table, I've got one value field, and I come into here and I'm going to say Edit Rule. Now if you were making a brand new rule, you'd hit New Rule while you're selected inside the pivot table, and it takes you into this here. So I have an option to say all cells showing sum of pay hours values. What that's going to do is tell it to affect everything in the values section in the pivot table. And all I've said is D10 does not equal blank. So when I put sum of pay hours in here, it would be 0 or blank, no hours for that person in that pay period, because that's how we have it sliced. It's going to say go find me Cyber 6 with a temp code A and a report date of 10/15/16, and there's nothing. It doesn't exist, so it's not going to populate any value, but it does here, so that's why we see it. So what this formula does is say you don't it says D10, and it's going to say with how the pivot table works, I don't have dollar signs. If you're familiar with cell referencing, those absolute references, no dollar signs means it's going to go throughout the entirety, as opposed to this here, it's referencing that pivot table. Specifically apply rule 2, and I said does not equal blank, and if that's the case in the formatting, I said fill it as green, so that's the entire cell is green, and then the font, I said change the font to green as well. If I were to change this to black and then hit OK and apply, now you see the actual hours. Maybe this is exactly what you want to see. You want to see hours with employees so that you know how many were accounted for in that pay period. You see this 160 is probably because my Marvel superhero was duplicated when I changed out the names. But that's how that works. It'll come as that, as green and green, but if you wanted it to be where the hours show, go ahead and make that change. That's how this temp works. Does the count, so pay period. You can see how many, so if the commander says how many temps do we have on board right now, you can come and say, sir, it's the last pay period, or ma'am, it's 29. And that's 29 that have hours. It's not going to count if it's blank. So if I were to highlight these, that's 29 total down here, although this one is showing it's only going to count the numbers. Okay, next we're going to move to LSL and awards, and it's exactly what it sounds like. So in the raw data we had the true false in there, right? Is it LSL and awards? And if it is, then we can select a filter to say only show me the true. So that's how this pivot table is working. You can see that in the filter. Again, pay hour code, if it's LSL and award, is going to come across the top. So if there's awards that start in here, you're going to see the type of award. What was it? What was the award for? And then we have report date, squadron, employee name. So it'll expand over time. You can hit this minus here. Let me zoom in, this minus, and that'll roll up by pay period. So eventually you'll have all these pay periods, whether there's data or not, and maybe blank. So in this case, I have lump sum annual. So I know for my folks what this came from was people retiring, so they got paid out their lump sum leave at the end. One thing that we wanted to note, and it won't make it in this version, there's some ongoing things about retention, recruiting, and awards limits and things. If you need to see those, if that's something that you're currently dealing with, how much money can I spend? What does the 1% mean for this type of person? This is currently where you'd come for that information in this awards, so that you could see by pay period, by amount, by person, what those awards are being paid for and how much you've paid over time. So that is the lump sum leave and awards tab. Next, we'll move over to employee hour. So this is simply taking a look at every single employee that we have. So it's doing that same count. It's counting if they're on there with any kind of hours, and on down the line. So there's going to be hundreds. And what I've found this useful for in terms of auditing or just keeping my eye on things, of course I can see who's on the books, whether it's on the books doing hours or on the books USERRA or whatever it may be. The other thing that it's going to be is it's going to flag me if there's over 80 hours in a pay period. Now sometimes it's legitimate that there would be over 80, but the vast majority of people, if they're working a normal shift, normal pay period is going to be 80 hours. So it'll give you a quick visual indicator to say, hey, do I need to check this out or not? Or if you recognize that person, maybe you just say, I know I don't have to check that out, no worries. So, and the other thing to keep in mind, this R60 data is a by pay period snapshot, essentially, of what happened in the pay cycle. So if there was actually a mistake made, let's say 106 was a mistake made, if there's a correction that's going to happen, it's never going to show corrected in this pay period. This pay period is frozen in time. So 106, and let's say 2 pay periods or 3 pay periods down the line, maybe data that's not in here yet, they made a correction in DCIPS, pushed it through, and then it corrected for the total hourly. So it took their leave, and instead it needed to be regular time, regular graded time, because a time card wasn't certified. Those corrections get shown, but they get shown in future pay periods. So keep that in mind when you start working with your CivPay folks or front office folks, that you may see this in this particular data. Things that you cannot see in this, you can see them in DCIPS. So keep that in mind. The next tab is LOA Recon. So this is a hot topic, and spoke about it in the raw data a little bit. So go back real quick, and issue. We just titled it issue. Is there an issue with this particular record that we're seeing? And so if it says false, that means no, there's no issues. If it says true, there are. What we can do is then come into the pivot table, and we've expanded this from the first time we did a class, but now we have the ability to do a CivPay LOA audit, which is a big ticket item for NGB, for the Air Force, for DoD, in terms of appropriating funds properly and planning and programming them. We can take a look at that for issues so that we know what to correct, and we can also take a look at it for that 3821 audit. So we brought in the squadron, that's why we brought the passcode in. So in manpower PCN, so it's this squadron, here are the manpower PCN, here are the employee names, and then the data elements associated with how the dollars are executing for that employee time. And so we can start to take a look at that overall, so we can sit down with our HR satellite and go, okay, most recent pay period, here's what's on the books. And your HR liaison likely has a spreadsheet or something that they track civilian manpower with that is associated with this PCN and this person and this passcode. So it gives you the ability to print this out, sit down with them and say, hey, this is what happened in the pay system. Is that what you're showing should be happening? And if not, you can do that audit with them. The next thing we can do, because we have that, remember, true, false, issue, no issue, I'm again filtered on the current pay period, and I'm going to say true. I want to see where there's issues. So now we filter straight to the lines that have some type of an issue. Is it the PEC, PIF, PERS do not match? Is it no PEC assigned whatsoever? Is there no manpower PCN associated with that member? So it's going to take you to that immediately so that you can again take that to your HR so that they may work with DCPDS to update it, or you can work with your folks to update it in DCIPS. So that's a really powerful tool. Use both ways. It'll just be there for you. Now that'll be it as far as explaining. The next video is going to be, or maybe more than one video, are going to be the meat of this tool. So the ability to actually not only do analysis but offer great decision support depending on the circumstances. So that's when we're going to move into the work year execution tab, where we see it lay out, where we input values, projection adjustments. This is the biggest change from the first time we put a training class out there. I've expanded this quite a lot to offer you the flexibility to account for any type of things that happen. So one pay period hourly adjustments, increases, decreases in permanent or temporary employees, and then LWOP for members. So now that we're in these cycles with our RCPs, where we're going to be sending many more full-time employees out the door for 6 months at a time, or a TSP package that you become a part of, we're going to be able to account for that in here and then see how that execution and projection happens to be able to plan for whenever big things happen. So we'll discuss that. Charts, we're offering you some visuals as well. So work your execution by pay period, work your execution projected versus actual over time, and then a straight line. Hey, here's what we're funded at, and then here's how we're plotting against that. And at least how this is set up right now, it looks like we're going to over execute just a little bit, but that's what we're going to be getting into. Please check that video out. See you then.